evening and welcome to Sun Middle Temple. We are so happy you've joined us. My name is Alba and I use she, her pronouns. This is our first July observance, and I'm so happy you are here. As always, this service is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember our ongoing pentagram project, and remember to participate in our mid-year survey. These results decide what we do for the entire year and are very important. They are completely anonymous, and I want your 100% real thoughts. We'll open today with our opening words, which will appear on the slide behind you. Please read along at home or listen as I read the words aloud. We welcome you into the light of the gods and light this flame in celebration. May its brightness symbolize our connection to the gods and the natural world. May you join us in this community of faith, cherishing love and with open hearts. So our theme for this month is faith versus doubt, and today we'll be learning about different arguments for God, and I will explain them and their objections. Now, most of these arguments are written from a monotheistic perspective, but I will explain how they are adapted at the end and how they work for us. So we will start with the ontological argument, which is one that's a little difficult to understand, so I'm going to break it down as simply as possible. So the argument is as follows. Imagine God. When imagined, God is the best, most perfect thing in the entire world. Consider the different qualities of God. Suppose God has a power rating of 1 to 10, with power being one quality. Also suppose that existence is one of these qualities. But instead of a scale, existence is either real or not real. A God that has a power scale of 5 out of 10 but exists is better than the God that has a power of 10 out of 10 but doesn't exist. In other words, something that exists in the mind and in reality is better than something that only exists in the mind. If we imagine God as the most perfect thing, but he does not exist, then we can imagine something that is better than him. However, we cannot imagine something greater than God, and existence is a requirement for being the greatest thing. Therefore, God has to exist. In the most simple terms possible, it is a requirement for the most perfect being imaginable to exist, or it is not the most perfect being, therefore God as the most perfect being must exist. So Saint Anselm came up with this argument, and he thought that it was simply the best, and he was so proud, and he sent it to his buddy Guanilo, who laughed in his face about it. This happens over letters. You can read them, by the way. He points out that this argument, if legitimate, should work for other things, and suggests replacing God with an island. If you can imagine a perfect best island, it must exist because if it is a perfect best island, and existence is a qualifier of perfectness, then it must exist. Well, this is obviously untrue, because you can imagine the most perfect island, and it does not have to exist. He also points out that by starting with imagine a perfect God, you are assuming the qualities of God before proving that he exists. Anselm responds to this objection, of course, and many philosophers since then have modified this argument and improved upon it. And of course, people have argued against their improvements. Descartes, Sodra, Spinoza, and Leibniz have been a few of the philosophers who agreed on or improved on this argument, and Aquinas, Hume, Rowe, and Russell are the people who have disagreed with this argument. There are a variety of discussions about it, and I recommend that you research them. So the next argument was actually originally created by Aquinas, who was one of the people who disagreed with Saint Anselm. This argument is nowhere near as difficult to explain as the previous one, and is as old as Plato. While Aquinas was one of the first to explain this argument in the form we use today, we will be covering a more recent interpretation as Aquinas' is out of date with scientific knowledge. This argument begins with the statement that everything that exists has a cause. The universe exists. If everything that exists has a cause, and the universe exists, then it must have a cause. It then follows from this that there must be a creative force outside the universe that created it. Therefore, in this case the Christian God, who is outside the universe, immutable, which means unchangeable, timeless, spaceless, and powerful, exists. There are many objections and responses to these objections for this argument as well. The objections include the idea that God could also be caused and simply be one element in a long, endless line of causes, the idea that it's not necessarily true that everything needs a cause, because that idea is based solely on our experience and might not be true, which is the objection of Hume, That this in no way proves the Christian God, just any cause, and the idea that if every member of a set is explained, then the existence of the whole set is explained. So then the next argument that we're going to cover today is called the teleological argument, although you may know it by its more common name, the argument from design. The teleological argument... Sorry, I lost my place. This argument is, in its most modern form, based on the probability of the universe existing the way it does. Why do the laws of the universe allow for life to exist? If they were even a tiny bit different, it would be impossible for life as we know it to exist. The number of chances for something small to be different so that life as we know it would not exist is absolutely incredibly immense. It is much more probable that some being outside the universe set the universal controls to allow for life to exist. The first form of this argument was that the beauty and functionality of the universe proves the existence of a creator, which you may have heard as the watchmaker argument. If you come across a watch on the beach, you must assume that there was a creator and that the watch did not occur naturally due to its complexity. The universe is vastly more complex than a watch, so there must be a creator. In its modern interpretations, there are so many physical laws of the universe that are set a specific way, and it is statistically monumentally more likely for the universe to be set up by an outside force than for the universe to have originated organically. There are many different objections to the watchmaker version of the theory that are now out of date due to changes in scientific knowledge. The objections that are still relevant to the teleological argument are that while it proves a creator or an architect, it does not prove the Christian God, the same as the cosmological argument, that small complex elements can have laws that then follow to create things, therefore the universe can, and that it does not explain the designer's origin, which means there could be something beyond them. Most of these objections are very similar to the objections to the cosmological argument. So now we're on to one of the most famous arguments of all time for the existence of God, which is Pascal's wager. So Pascal's wager says that either God exists or he doesn't. Those are the only two options. If God exists and you don't believe in him, you'll end up in hell. If God doesn't exist, then nothing happens either way, belief or non-belief. Since we can't know if God exists, it is safer to believe in him, because if he doesn't exist, nothing happens even if you believe in him. And if he does exist and you don't believe in him, you will end up in hell. And the way to handle this not believing is to practice believing over and over again until you do believe in God. There are many objections to this argument, starting with the fact that it presumes the idea of a Christian God from the get-go. There's also the idea that this cheapens faith because you are believing for the purpose of getting something, rather than the actual faith. There was also a point that this doesn't in any way prove the existence of God. It just says it's safer to believe in him. And then the final argument that we're going to go over today is one you've probably heard in apologetics, but not phrased as an argument for the existence of God. The most basic form of this argument is that humans have morals. God is the best reason for humans having morals, therefore God exists. There are variations of this argument, such as the argument from objective morality that starts with the assumption that morals are objective. If morals are objective, then they have to come from God. Morals are objective. Therefore, there must be some form of God that provides moral objectivity. The most obvious objection to this argument is that there are many ways that humans form morals, and the fact that moral reasoning has changed over time means it's impossible for morals to be objective at all, and morals changing means they cannot come from a perfect God, because a perfect God is immutable and therefore unchangeable. This is not an argument that is commonly admitted, but it shows up in the form of the question, how do you have morals if you don't believe in God? Because if morals must come from God, and all humans have morals, God must have created them. Well, by now you're probably wondering why we have gone over all of these arguments for a God that many of us do not worship or believe in. The reason is because these arguments appear in these ways is their most common... The reason is because this is these arguments' most common form and the way that you will see them out in the world. This is also why many of them assume that God is perfect, because most faith used in these arguments assume that. But now we are going to discuss how these arguments are relevant to us. The first argument might be a little confusing in relation to paganism, as it relies specifically on the idea that God is perfect. While uncommon, this is a belief in paganism, especially among many Neoplatonists. If you believe that God is perfect and the one, then you can believe that God exists because he is perfect. The cosmological argument is easy to see how it applies to us because its application is one of the most common objections. The cosmological argument only proves that there has to be some form of creator, and not that there is the perfect God. As such, it is compatible with paganism and applicable to us. The cosmological argument in particular is generally applicable with modern scientific understanding and with most mythological explanations for the world. The teleological argument is applicable to us in the same way as the cosmological argument. Because it does not prove the perfect God, it only proves that there must be some form of architect, then it leaves that architect open for interpretation. This argument also aligns with modern scientific and mythological understandings of the world. Doesn't it make more sense if this supposed architect also created other deities in his universe to rule over certain parts of it, and that those deities create our pantheons today? So Pascal's wager is one of the arguments that is not applicable to us, simply because most of us don't believe in heaven or hell, which the wager relies on. We covered it here because it's one of the most common arguments and it's useful to know, but it does not apply to us without significant modifications. The argument from Raffaelli also does not prove the Christian God. It only proves that there must be some entity that is setting the moral code of humanity, and as you can see, even that is debated. As you can see, again, most of these arguments for God are applicable to us. As for our theme this month, is being faith and doubt, it is important to discuss different ways that people have explained their belief in gods. Faith without reason is called fideism, and while it can be a form of belief, it is not usual, rational, or safe for humans to believe without any form of doubts. To be clear, reason in this case is not about having reasons to believe in gods, such as unverified personal gnosticism, but using the process of reasoning for your case for gods. It is good and rational to think about the process for gods and if your god exists. It is also rational to have doubts and criticisms, as you can see from the fact that all of the above have criticisms from other thinkers. In November of last year, we discussed the idea of ethics of belief, as explained by Clifford. He says, the question of right or wrong has to do with the origin of his belief, not the matter of it, not what it was, but how he got it, not whether it turned out to be true or false, but whether he had a right to believe on such evidence as was before him. Here, Clifford is arguing that it is more important to have evidence for your beliefs regardless of the outcome, because making choices on unsound beliefs is likely to put others in danger in a variety of ways. This, of course, does not mean that UPGs and other experiences should be dismissed out of hand, but that faith should be doubted and looked at critically. Faith without doubt is irrational and dangerous, and as such, faith with reasoning and evidence in response to doubt is the best path forward. On a separate personal note, while I tried to portray all of these arguments with a fair stance and explain them evenly, there was only one of them that I considered have any merit. As such, I highly suggest that you all do your own research on these perspectives and come to your own conclusions about these arguments, so that any of my bias that comes through does not influence your opinion of these arguments. So we'll now move into the ritual portion of the observance, and I will play the video. We leave this offering for our gods to symbolize our connection and devotion. We gift this rock to symbolize the stability of the gods in our world. We gift this water to accept the flow of our lives. We welcome life and bless our offerings with oil to share our riches. We embrace our connection to each other and the world and celebrate our revival. So we'll now move into our closing words, and I will read the words aloud, and you can listen or read them aloud with me. As we move out into the world, let us remember our community of faith. Cherish love and open your heart as you walk through life. Hold dear the light of the gods and our connection with the natural world. Go forth in celebration and carry the light of connection within your heart. So we will now move into coffee hour and we can all chat and I will stop the recording.